My Lords, I've listened with great interest to this short debate, and I have to say, and it is almost certainly my fault, and I will probably need to be mildly humiliated as I'm corrected on the topic, but we've discussed the length of contracts by reference to Clause 1, subsection 7. But it seems to me that Clause 1, subsection 7 says nothing at all about the length of contracts. And the noble Lord the Minister now has the opportunity to put one or both sides of this question, to correct one or both sides of this question. The subsection in question says, no direction may be given under subsection 1 after the end of the period of 10 years, beginning with the day on which the Act is passed. And that's subsection 7. And subsection 8, which follows immediately on, gives the power to the Secretary of State by regulation to amend subsection 7 so as to extend the period for a further 5 years. So this is saying when the counterparty can enter into contracts, not when the contracts start. It's not saying when the contracts end. The contract, as long as it's awarded in the first 10 years, possibly 15 years depending, could be for 100 years. And nothing that has been tabled by noble lords, seems to me, in relation to this clause, affects that. I, however, speaking now to my amendment number 2, believe that I have bitten firmly on the question, and I have said no contract, whenever it's awarded, may last for more than 10 years and must contain a break clause after 5 years. So I think I am talking in my amendment about the length of the contract, but the other noble lords who've tried to talk about longer contracts aren't talking about longer contracts at all. So I may have got that completely wrong, but the noble lord...
Noble friend, give way. But for two reasons, I'm grateful to him. The first reason is, if he'll indulge me, is despite having asked the clerk for advice, I then carefully omitted to just declare an interest at the beginning of my speech, which I will now correct and draw attention of the House to my entry in the register as the non-executive chair of RVL Aviation, which I did during the second reading debate. But on my noble friend's specific question, I did in my speech, I think, refer to his amendment. He obviously hadn't, I had the misfortune of having supported his amendment before he had so ably moved it, but I absolutely agree with him that it's the contract length that's important and not just the period from when the bill becomes law.
I think we're all agreed that we should be talking about contract length. I'm just saying that my amendment is the only one that actually refers to it. That's the point I'm trying to make. So we're all agreed on it, that it should be that. And I also want to come to a point raised by the noble Lord Ravensdale in respect of competition. He says there must be an opening, at least in the future, for these revenue certainty mechanism contracts to be awarded competitively, and he seeks to put this in place in the bill now, and he appeared to say that if this was not done now through some sort of device such as he is proposing, then there would not be in future an opportunity for competitive procurement. If I've misrepresented him, of course, I will entirely give way and be corrected. But if I make the point, I see he might be about to rise, so I might as well complete the point before he corrects me. Because my understanding is there's nothing to prevent competitive procurement taking place from day one under these arrangements, and therefore it is not necessary to put in place an arrangement to secure it. But I'm open to being corrected on all hands about this, because I'm groping my way in the dark through this thicket.
Very briefly, the Noble Lord. I agree with what he said, and I think the Minister provided that clarification at second reading, that there's nothing in the bill that prevents competition. But I do think, for consistency with the other legislation that I outlined, that has that direction on similar competitive processes in the Energy Acts, and for clarity on the strategy, I think it would be beneficial to have that process set out in the bill.
I'm very grateful to the Noble Lord for explaining that, and I'm glad we're broadly ad idem, but he helps me to my third point, which is that the assumption by the Noble Lord, Lord Ravensdale, appears to be that the procurement of all future SAF, including non-HEFA SAF and potentially at some stage power to liquid, is going to have to depend upon or be supported by a revenue certainty mechanism, or at least some form of subsidy or support from the state. That appears to be the assumption. I wholly deprecate that assumption. I think it is appalling that we should embark upon this project with a view to a regime of perpetual subsidies. If SAF is not rapidly producible on a commercial basis in this country, then really, as I shall come to in other amendments, the whole project should be reconsidered at this stage. But I'm comforted in thinking that the government does not envisage perpetual subsidy by my reading of Clause 1, subsection 7 and subsection 8, because why would the government put in what is effect, these are the subsections I referred to before, so I won't read them out again, why would the government put into place what is in effect a sunset clause if it envisaged that there would be a need for perpetual subsidy? Because in effect, and the Noble Lord may want to confirm this, subsections 7 and 8 taken together are a sunset clause. At the end of 10 or possibly 15 years, no more contracts can be awarded without further primary legislation. So I just think that there's a degree of confusion, which I may have participated in what we're actually discussing. And we are giving to the Noble Lord, the Minister, the opportunity to bring a blast of fresh air to clear the fog and explain it all to us so that we know what we're talking about, because up until now I'm not entirely sure that we, all of us, are. Now, coming to my amendment number 2, which has been explained very well by the Noble Baroness Lady Pigeon, I don't need to elaborate on what it says, but I haven't yet given any rationale for why it should commend itself to the committee. Coming to my amendment number 2, before I sit down, amendment number 2 seeks to limit the length of contracts. Now, the reason for this is very simple. This bill is a large slice of corporate welfare. It gives, having given through the SAF mandate, which we approved last year, having given to the industry a guarantee of uptake of SAF so that you know that your product is going to have to be bought, that isn't enough for them. We're now going to give them, in addition, a guaranteed price. That's what they're demanding. Now, I don't blame them for demanding that. Let's have guaranteed demand and a guaranteed price. That's a very pretty place to be in. Let's transfer all the risk somewhere else. And who's going to pay that guaranteed price? Not the government, because it's not a subsidy, but rather they've discovered from the electricity market the contract for the difference, which the Noble Lord, Lord Ravensdale, has referred to some extent, at least for his thinking, as a model, but a structure which has given us the highest electricity prices in the civilized world. And so the cost, what this points to is the fact that the cost of SAF is going to fall on the airlines and potentially and ultimately on the passenger. And indeed, we will come to this later, but the the government has made an assessment of what that might mean in terms of pounds per ticket, so to speak, and that's the subject of a later amendment, which I won't trouble you with now. And therefore, given recognising the large element of corporate welfare in this bill and the need to get away from corporate welfare and incentivise competition, I suggest there should be some basis, and I'm grateful to my noble friend Lord Harper for supporting this, some basis for limiting the contract and therefore the benefits that accrue to the producers of SAF. I have suggested 10 years. 10 years is, of course, an arbitrary number. It might be 6 years, it might be 7, it might be 8. And I've suggested also, including with it, a break clause, which I put at 5 years, so that the government, if they saw that this was all going very well and the thing was becoming commercial, the government could walk away. And that must be the government's ambition. And I put that break clause in at 5 years. That is an equally arbitrary number. If the Minister agreed on the principle, he and I'm sure, could sit down and very rapidly agree a maximum length of contract and an appropriate term for the break clause. But I think it is in that direction that we should be looking if we are not to burden young people. There are not so many young people in the House, in the committee this evening. Many of us are getting to the point where our best flying days are behind us. But when you look to young people who perhaps work in other parts of the House, and you say, you are going to be paying for this for the next 20 years, you and your wives and your children and even potentially your grandchildren are going to be paying for this slice of corporate welfare. So if we don't get it right, the burden falls on you. When one thinks about that, then of course one is moved very strongly and surely moved in the direction of supporting my amendment number 2.